Welcome to Delenta Activate, the podcast that brings you insights and stories from executive coaches and changemakers in the leadership space. I'm your host, Dr. Naeema Pasha from Delenta, and I'm excited to share with you the latest trends, best practices, and innovations in coaching and leadership development. In this podcast, you'll hear from experts who successfully coached leaders and teams to achieve their goals and overcome challenges and transform their organizations. Whether you're a coach, a leader, or someone who wants to grow personally and professionally, this is the podcast for you. So tune in, get inspired, and activate your potential with Delenta Activate. Hello, I'm Naeema. I'm really glad to be with you. There's a little bit of a heat wave where I'm at the moment, so I'm looking a bit more warm than I normally do, but please forgive that. Because I'm really happy, so delighted to have on the Delenta Activate podcast today, Bastian Küntzel. Welcome, Bastian.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
No, it's so good to have you here. And Bastian, just to introduce you a little further, if I may, your partner at TCO International Corporate Coaching, Training and Consulting, with this incredible history of learning design, organizational culture, and really taking, I think, a really innovative view around, how we sort of navigate all these challenges ahead of us. And I know in your LinkedIn, and I'd encourage people to look at your LinkedIn and connect and all those sort of things. You said helping people to choose to change, which is amazing. And you describe yourself as a facilitator, moderator, host, trainer, coach, lecturer, author, broadcaster, friend, which I hope will happen now, father, partner, cook, mensch, baker, maker, convener, nurturer, space holder, companion. And finally, you describe yourself as a nerd. So you managed to fit nerdism, as it were, into all this stuff, including baking and so on. So thank you so much for joining us today. I thought I might just start at the beginning, as opposite of the Stephen Covey thing, about you and what brought you into this space of thinking the way you do, in terms of looking back at your early career. And you've been involved in education, I guess, for some years. But just tell me what drew you into that space to begin with.
I think it all started when I was around 15. I think I was invited by my friend to join a weekend camp of this youth organization that he was involved in. And it sounded really fun to me. So I joined him and I arrived home. I would say I arrived in my world where I didn't even know that I belonged there, but I felt very immediately like this is my thing. And it was all around learning about peace, about citizenship, about taking responsibility, about all kinds of topics in an incredibly playful and engaging and fun way. And by making friends with people from all over the world, and by just having these experiences together, reflecting about them together, and doing stuff together, that that was the learning philosophy, and it resonated with me deeply. And then as I became more and more involved in this organization, I participated in workshops or in conferences and things like that. And I met some people who I learned were professional trainers in the corporate space or in different organizations. Like their job was to do this. And I thought, oh, you could do this as a job? That's now I know what I want to do. So I went on to study intercultural communication and adult education, did that, and went straight out of university into becoming a freelance trainer, mostly in the beginning in the youth field. So working a lot with the Council of Europe and the European Commission's youth programs on topics such as human rights education, citizenship education, these non-formal education, these kinds of things that are very dominant in the youth field as topics, very value-based in the youth field. And then from there, I went on when I became a father and had to earn a little more money than you can make as a youth work trainer. At least in my case, it was that case. and started working with corporate clients, and that I found was very interesting, because I could use a lot of the methods that I knew from youth work, and they were completely innovative in the corporate field. Like, people were blown away by the stuff that in the youth field has been done for decades. And so that was really nice to see how I can transfer some of those experiences and skills into the corporate field. And I had just developed a very deep comfort with being in front of a group and facilitating a slightly chaotic but also meaningful learning process. And so I had this benefit that I didn't come in from nowhere. I came in with a lot of experience standing in front of a large group of people and facilitating their process. And so here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, so the universe has brought us here in this moment with all these things have happened. And I want to start off with a really difficult question before we go into the learner's journey, because your work is so international and connecting and about people, going through change and understanding. And we're living in, I feel perhaps, from my experience of, living, I suppose, in the world, that it feels that it's more polarized. I can't say that for sure, because people living in another time might say similar things, but it feels more polarized. It feels quite antagonistic. It feels in some ways more division and so on coming forward. Do you feel that the work you're doing, how do you feel that the work you're doing can contribute to that? First of all, do you think that? And secondly, how do you feel your work can start contributing perhaps to connection? I was thinking about what you said when you went into your youth camp at 15, and how that really struck you as you come home, and it was about connecting and learning and experiencing. So yeah, just wanted to ask you that big question.
That big question. Wow. I think there is some interesting evidence around a certain degree of circularity of big world events happening almost in rhythms of 80 to 100 years. So if we look back 100 years from now, we had Second World War and all the things that led up to that. 100 years before that, we had a civil war in the US. 100 years before that, we had the War of Independence in the US. So there is kind of a little bit of a rhythm to this. And I think at each moment of these crisis times, there is something after it that wouldn't have been possible without going through crisis. But of course, whatever comes next, it's going to be different, and that's always very scary. And I think particularly people that have been in positions of privilege for a long period of time are particularly scared of things that are going to come, because there is, I think, whoever grows up with privilege like I have has an innate sense that they didn't earn that and they don't have a right really to it. And so they defend it very, very strongly, because that idea is very scary. And so there's a lot of fear around that. But what I think is we're on the path towards is a world that is not using fossil fuels, that is not based on extractive industries, but is based on regenerative industries. And that is very scary, because a lot of the power in the world is concentrated around extractive industries, if we look at where the dominant economies are in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of fear right now. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. There's some hope in some corners. And I like this quote by Mr. Rogers, is that in any crisis, look for the helpers, because they're always there. And there are some really meaningful initiatives that happen around imagining a future that is better for everyone. And those give me a lot of hope. But change is hard, change is scary, change is really, really difficult. And particularly when you feel alone, or when you feel like the new narratives are going to be against you, it's even harder and more scary. So I think this explains some of the polarization. It doesn't make it easier, though, to live through them, of course.
You give me hope, because I did my research in change as well, and So yes, absolutely, we find change difficult, but I think sometimes we find change difficult if we don't trust the change makers. And so what you've given me hope that there, with the quote as well, that perhaps we have to, that's kind of what we have to do, either look for helpers or be the helpers. So that kind of leads into your work, actually. And I wonder if we can start off now, really, for you to, your learner's journey. I mean, you've got the podcast as well, but I mean, you've been on a learning journey yourself, haven't you? So
everyone is.
yeah, it's like, but you've been on a learner journey about learning as well, which I think is interesting. So please, if you could give us the background first, and then some of the kind of nuggets that we can all, like, take to our heart and things. So
yeah, sure. So the learner's journey is a framework I developed some years ago and wrote up in a book that was published in 2019. So
we'll have
before
a link
COVID, before that all happened. But it's based on the idea that, or a few foundational ideas are around that. When we remember something, we mostly remember things in story form. Story is kind of this most foundational human currency. And we remember meaningful events or meaningful transitions or meaningful transformations in story form. And at its core, learning is transformation, right? If there's no transformation, there hasn't really been learning, I think. And also, if you don't remember anything, then there hasn't been much learning going on either. Like, you could explain me something really important and magnificent, but if I don't remember it, the question would be, did I learn it? And so if we remember in story form anyway, and if we experience our lives in story form most of the time as well, which is all built on the idea of narrative identity, that identity is the story that we tell about ourselves, with ourselves as the protagonist of that story, making sense of all these different life events as part of who we are, then it does make sense to design learning experiences based on the architecture of storytelling, because it's going to be remembered as a story anyway. So we might as well build the important events of the learning journey alongside the structure within which it will be remembered. So we work with the structure, not against the structure. So even if you go to an extremely boring lecture, and the lecture was not designed as a story, you will still remember it as a story of, I went to that lecture, it was incredibly boring, but I sat next to a very cute person, and this is how I met your mother. Like, so it's always going to be a story form. So we might as well design it based on the story. And this is then where I, by accident, this manufacturing organization had asked me to run a training for trainers, for some of the technical experts, so because they had to explain or run trainings, but they didn't know how to run trainings. And I had to kind of think, what's the most intuitive way how you can describe how to very broadly design a training program? And I thought it's a little bit like a movie. There has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is how I described training design to this group of engineers. But then later I came across this video on one of my favorite blogs, kotki.org, on the hero's journey, which was the first time that I heard about it, and it immediately resonated with me, because I really, really enjoy also seeing how just stuff gets made. I love watching videos on that explains how pencils are made, or how, industrial croissants are made. It's really lovely. So I was incredibly intrigued by it, and then I discovered from there, I learned more about the story circle that Dan Harmon built based on Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey. And I thought those are 8 steps that are actually incredibly useful to go through when you are designing a learning program. So those are: protagonist, need, go, search, find, take, return, and change. And
do you
so
say that again? Because I'm a huge... I've used the hero's journey in the work I do as well, but I'd love to hear it again a little bit more.
It's protagonist. There's a protagonist. The protagonist has a need and then goes into the unknown. If you know Frozen to. There's even a song about Into the Unknown, right? So goes into the unknown, search, which is always the longest part of any story because that's where all the adventure happens, but then finds that paradigm shifting insight of that turns the tides, and then takes, so makes this insight their own, returns back to the known world, having changed or being changed or bringing change. And so this is every romantic comedy, every action movie, every fantasy. Like this is Star Wars, this is Lord of the Rings, this is Harry Potter, this is
How I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Mother. Every episode, right? It's based on this structure. And so when you build a training program or a university seminar or I suppose a coaching program or I've built mentoring programs based on this. I've built conference programs based on this. It's really helpful to start with the protagonists, which are the learners, and to really understand who are they, what is their world, what are their priorities, what are they scared of, what are the pressures they're under, to really understand what are the forces of the universe in which these protagonists exist within, and who really are they. And then
just before we go into that, I'll just ask a question on that, because this is something I find intriguing and I'd love your view. So when we start off with the protagonist, we're getting people to understand who they are, what's influenced, how far back do you want people to go in, if we've got coaches listening into this, do you want them to go back to like the psychodynamic view that, the early childhood that influenced them, or do you want them to sort of look at, I'm working in this organization, this is the kind of experience, or do you vary it?
It's not even that, and I don't work as a coach, right? No. So I'm not necessarily using this a lot in a coaching program, but it's not so much for them to understand who they are, but for you as a trainer, as a facilitator, or as someone who has been charged with understanding or with creating a learning process, to be able to say, this is for you, right? Because a lot of learning programs that don't resonate, they don't resonate because they were not made for these learners. They were made for the person running the training program. That's because so they really enjoy standing in front of groups.
But it's something so profound, yes.
But when you can authentically say, this is for you, I made this for you, and you are at the core of this, and you count, and I'm here as your companion, but this is about you, then we're off to a very good start, right? And
because you talk about looking at your TED journey as well, your TED talk, talk about growth companionship on the learner's journey.
Yeah.
I know we're going to go through the hero's journey, but mate, does that fit in here? Can I ask you
Absolutely,
about that?
Because when we think about who is it about, then we need to acknowledge that it's not about us as the companions, it's about them, the learners. And we might learn something on the way, but when you are, like, you got to be the Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Gandalf or the Princess Leia to Rey. Like, it's not about you. Your task is to be there on the journey with them, to open doors for them, to encourage them when they need encouragement, to challenge them when they need challenging. But it's always in service of them and their need and the change they are seeking. Yeah, and quite often when a learning experience doesn't resonate, it's because the learners realize this is not about me, or this is not about a need I have. Right? This is not
an ego that's come in around us to be the deliverer, to be the professional, to be the expert. Or
exactly. I've said certainly in classes where I was pretty sure that whether or not I was there didn't matter. Right? So why should I pay attention if me paying attention doesn't matter? Right? But if you are in a learning environment where you feel like this is for me, this is about me, this is about my growth and me participating in this and me listening to this and me learning from this matters, then I'm engaged, right? And if it's about a need that I have or a curiosity that I have, it matters even more to me. And this is the next stage, is the need phase, where like sometimes you have a group of learners that come into a training room and they don't particularly feel like they need to learn something, right? And sometimes you have a group of people that is very eager to learn. But what you can do when you have a group of people that isn't quite sure if they actually need to learn anything, you can work with experiential learning exercises in understand or in creating experiences where they realize, oh, I thought of myself as a very tolerant person. Actually, I'm not. Or I thought of myself as an unbiased person, but actually I have plenty of biases. Or I thought of myself in being competent in this area, but actually I'm not quite as competent as I thought I would be. And then they want to learn, right? Because they realize that they have an intrinsic need to learn, not an extrinsic motivation to learn. If your whole point of attending a class is to get a certificate or to get a degree or to get a some paper at the end of it, the moment you have the paper, you don't have to remember what you've learned because the point was the paper. But if you join a learning experience because you want to grow and you want to learn and you are eager to develop, and then you go on a path to get you there, then it will stay with you because you wanted that for yourself, right? And so this is where this comes together.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was just saying this is transformational. I mean, I'm going to link it back to my very first complex question about the world in a state of flux. Obviously, we have that at various times, but if you look at the current state at the moment, developing deeper understanding ourselves through learning, this is like upending what learning, because I'm working in universities and, you know, delivering on modules, and, you know, people are there to get the module credits, and to some extent, education has to be to some extent transactional, but you're talking about transformational education, which is engaging and creates learning that is deeper and applied and that people take on to other aspects. I mean, that's what every educator wants to do, but you're saying this is the way to do it, which is not there. I don't think it's there.
I mean, there are always, I think great educators have throughout history always intuitively worked this way. Great educators have always
but they
focused
have to find
and centered.
ways the system is structured.
Yeah, the system is structured. I mean, the system is built out of industrialization with a very clear purpose to create comparably
skills,
qualified people to do tasks that shouldn't be only be able to done by one talented individual, but that are transferable. This is how our economy works, and there's a value to a comparability of degrees, right? There is like, it shouldn't matter if you studied medicine at this university or that university. I will still trust you that you know what bacteria do, right? It's so there is a high value on comparability of a formal schooling degree, that they covered a comparable curriculum, that they had a comparable vigor of making sure that you go out with a certain set of understandings about certain topics. But that doesn't mean that, and particularly when you work outside of the formal education system, you are a little bit more free of that, and you are a little bit more in the business of actually leading transformations. But of course, there's always been great educators that, despite the system, were able to do transformational education in the formal schooling system.
This is going to be, and I'll let you go to your next point, but this is going to be this kind of transformational education, what people talk about in terms of a world far more technologically advanced, artificial intelligence coming in into even in education. So having that ability, one of the things you're talking about is this is self-reflection, understanding, critical thinking, maybe sort of much more an individual through this individualized process. I think it's honestly, I think it's incredible. But let me.
Yeah, but I think there's we actually have there an interesting dilemma with AI, for example, because there's been quite, I think, some research that I've seen, and I don't know how valid it is, but it resonates with me as being probably true, that when you get a question and you think it's from a human, you will care differently about it than if you get a question and you know it's from a machine. And I think where it comes to the real need of learners, I find often, is to be seen and is to be recognized and is to be embraced in their humanity and connected with, and then accompanied on a process that is saturated with empathy and with care and with connection. And I think this is where AI can do a lot of the things that are about transactional education, that are about about accompanying you to learn a certain set of facts in a way that is more capable of repetitions, more capable of just not losing patience with you, like all of these things. Where I know when I practice math with my daughter, I'm sometimes not the best person to do that because I might lose patience because I'm a human with emotions that is involved as a human with emotions. And maybe what she needs is an incredibly patient machine that says, all right, let's try again. All right, let's try again. All right, let's try again. So this is where machine-supported learning processes have a lot of potential, I think. But when we're talking about true transformation and true growth at a deep human level, that will always be more powerful in the dynamic between two humans.
I hope so.
I think so.
If we get, so I was going to go to another thought, but let me ask you to continue on the learner's journey, because this is like fantastic stuff.
Okay, so you have the protagonist. The protagonist has a need, and then goes into the unknown. Yeah, and so this transition from the known world into the unknown world, this is quite scary, and you need two conditions in order to go there. And it needs to be safe enough to go there. It doesn't need to be safe, but it needs to be safe enough, right? That when I fail, someone will catch me. When I make a mistake, I won't be humiliated. Quite well described as like secure-based leadership or as psychological safety. Like these concepts apply very strongly there. And so it needs to be safe enough to be able to engage with something that you are not good at yet, and something that you don't know yet, something that is unfamiliar, something that is uncomfortable, something that is new to you. And it needs to be relevant to the need and the change that you want to bring. Yeah, so it needs to be safe enough and it needs to be relevant enough. And then you will go into the unknown. Yeah, if those two conditions are met, then learners will say, all right, I don't know this yet, but I want to find out. I don't understand this yet, but I will want to put in the work to understand this because it resonates with my need and it will get me where I want to get to, the change that I seek. Yeah, so these are the two things. And this is where, as learning companions, we play an incredibly important role because we're the one that makes it safe enough often. Yeah, and we're the ones that can pick out the different things that happen in the unknown as the things that resonate with the needs and with the change. Yeah, so we have a lot of control or a lot of influence there.
I think that's a really massively important thing that for people listening in is because people often talk, and obviously when I talk about change as well, people often talk about change is scary, we're fearful, people don't like change. And actually most people go, well, hell, in my life I've been through so much change and here I am, so it's about those risks, as you say, that they feel safe enough. That's the big thing. And so you contextualize, because sometimes people can feel we're a bit gaslit by training or books and things that we're scared of change. And you think, man, we've been through so much change in our lives as individuals, as communities, as countries. We can do it. But I like what you really, really can, if I can underline that, for as companions on this journey to support people, it's the safe enough.
Yeah.
Safe enough. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. No, I think it's of course, we go through change all the time, but there's a difference between the change that is thrown upon us, and the change that we choose, right? And I think the distinction quite often is that if we look careful at the changes that we were able to choose, where we had agency over, do I want to do this challenging thing or not, then it is quite often the distinguishing factor between choosing or not choosing is is it relevant to the thing that I want to achieve? And am I being accompanied by someone who I trust that when I fall, I will be picked up, or when I fail, I can try again and I won't be laughed at. And I think of course you can have traumatic amounts of change, and you come out of them traumatized, and that's not what we want in when we create learning experiences. We want people, or we want to create an environment where people can say, there's a scary amount of change that you're proposing that I engage with, but I trust you enough and I feel safe enough that I will try.
Brilliant.
And then we can get into it.
So what comes next?
So then you go into the unknown, and then you have the search phase. And that's probably what we most associate with learning experiences. Yeah. So you have the experiments, you have the engaging with theory, you have the engaging with practice, you try out, you fail interestingly, you try again, you fail interestingly, you try again. And so you do all the stuff, the bulk of the journey happens there. Yeah. So, but it happens more effectively if we've done a good job leading up to it. Yeah, it happens very ineffectively if you've not done a good job. But the protagonist need and go, that can happen in a relatively short amount of time if done effectively. But if we don't do it, then we're going upstream all the time. When we do it well, then we are feeding hungry people instead of, feeding someone a food they don't like after a meal that they just had. It's not going to go so easily. So these are those things, and then we have the find phase. And this is where people kind of have their insight. And on the way towards find, we have a lot of control over the process. We can't make people find their insight. We can't make people have the aha moment, right? You can't say, okay, you've now had this revelation. No, that's not how it works. But what we can do is we can create a lot of moments where reflection is possible. We can create a lot of moments where transformational conversations can happen. We can create a lot of moments where pause is possible. We can work with journaling. We can work with all kinds of things that increase the probability that someone finds something, right? We can't make it happen, or we can increase probabilities. And but what often is the case, unfortunately, is that's where it stops. And I think what's important is then when we go back up again, we go to take and return and change, that in the take phase, people make it their own. To be, instead of I'm someone that has learned this, to I'm now someone that knows this. Yeah, I'm now the kind of person that knows how to do this. And I know how to do it my way. Yeah, I now feel competent enough in it because I've experienced myself in it. I was able to make it my own. And then through practice, through experimentation, through all of these things, through saying, how would you apply this to your own context? How would you take this into conversations or meetings with your colleagues going forward, or into your life overall? And then you have the return towards your known world again. And again, here often we underestimate how much more effective the sustainability of the learning would be if we don't do that with intentionality and consciously. So to think about who will be my allies going forward, who are some of the people for whom it's not in their favor that I bring this new change. Yeah, quite often in organizational change, you have a few people that learn about a new way of leadership, or that learn about a new way of dealing with topics, and they come back to their own departments and say, hey, how about we do this differently and that differently? And that can be super threatening for some people who've built a career on doing it the old way and not the new way. And so it's important to think about what are all the things that can make long-term success and sustainability of this insight more probable, and what are some of the very reasonable ways in which this can taper out and will be forgotten in 2 weeks, and to create active strategies around increasing probabilities for sustainable learning and decrease probabilities for quickly forgetting about it. And then you have brought the more sustainable long-term change that you were seeking in the very beginning.
That's so interesting, and people from coaching backgrounds will know about that kind of neuroscience of like setting down, how we have these pathways in our brain that are set down. So how we override those is what you've just described. Is that environment and repeat consistency, because the brain will always want to go back to the one we're more comfortable with. Yep. But honestly, I should admit to people listening, I sent about 30 questions to Bastian because I was like, gosh, your work is so exciting. And I feel like asking those and another 10 because you've just really sparked so much thinking. But there are 2 more questions I'm going to ask. One is quite in a sense, because I do think if you're a learning practitioner or coaching, there's this overlap, and there's this, and you talk about engagement, and you said that go through the hero's journey, and you go through these different things like search and as a protagonist and all those things. Have you, just on a practical basis, where do you encounter resistance from learners, and how do you overcome it, or do you not overcome it? When people are resistant to this, perhaps this process of the learner's journey.
To be frank, I didn't really encounter a lot of resistance because, I don't say okay, we're now in the protagonist phase and we're going to do this, and we're now in the needs phase and we're going to do that. But it's just you don't get a lot of resistance from your house if you start with the foundations and then you build the basement, and only once you have the basement built, you start building the first floor. And then once it's a relatively logical process that has a lot of innate momentum where one phase leads to the next, and the next and the next. So ideally, or in most cases in my experience, learners don't realize that they are in a design process, and they shouldn't, right? Because that's not their job to have a meta view on the process. That's our job as facilitators or as coaches or as trainers, is to have that meta view on why am I doing this right now? What the learners are experiencing is, okay, we did this and now we did this, and somehow what comes next feels like a natural progression from what we just did before. And so they are not necessarily resistant. What can happen is there's resistance to what you want to do, and that's an indication that you didn't see your protagonists. That means you didn't really spend enough time trying to understand your protagonists. That means that you didn't invest enough time to really knowing what is important to them and what would make them seen and what resonates with them. So it's an indication of a flaw in your process as a facilitator or trainer, not a flaw on the side of the learners. The learners are always going to do what is a logical response to what it is that we propose. If it resonates, it resonates. If it doesn't resonate, there's a good reason for it not resonating. And then we need to be inquisitive and curious as to where we didn't fully see them, or where we were maybe more enchanted by our own knowledge and what we want to give, instead of focusing on what do they need.
I mean, that literally is describing how a learner's journey should be. It's full of that kind of empathy in terms of that ideation, empathy, really understanding, connect. It's I hope people, obviously there's links, will be able to read more about your work, your book, your podcasts. You do retreats. I'm kind of like, kind of like to learn more myself. And, I just want to congratulate you on everything done. I'm sure people are going to find this really interesting. But the last question is something that you mentioned about organizational designs that amplify humanity. I first read that as simplify humanity, and I thought that sounds good, but actually amplify humanity sounds great. But could you just, so we started with something quite profound and big, and kind of ending, if I can, on something profound and big, and you're around organizational designs that amplify humanity, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's an idea that I've been just steeping in for a while. Is this if we look at like modern organizational designs, they mostly come out of the Industrial Revolution, more or less 100 years ago, where the machines weren't sophisticated enough to do the kinds of repetitive tasks that were needed for an industrial scale of production, right? So you needed people to be able to become more like machines, to be good employees. Yeah? A good employee was as close to a machine as possible, reliable, dependable, able to repeat the quality of tasks to a certain standard repeatedly, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in the last couple of decades, we've increased capabilities of machines to a degree that they can perform certain tasks better than humans now. But we're only at that transition, right? And at the moment, we're at a very difficult point of that transition where a lot of machines can do things like art or music or poetry better than many humans, but they're really bad at folding laundry or at cleaning your bathroom. So we're at the moment at this threshold of are the machines going to do all the beautiful human stuff like poetry and art and ideas and all of that, and the humans are going to serve the machines, or do the tasks that machines seem to not be very good at, like folding laundry. Or can we create organizational designs where we actually use the capability of the machines to do very machine things? So repetitiveness, being fairly oblivious to whether or not it's hot or cold or wet or dry outside, or and these things that machines are great for, and really reorient our view on humans of doing the things that humans are innately capable for, which is connecting with other humans, which is creativity, which is doing things that are meaningful expressions of their beauty and their complexity and all of these things. And I know it sounds very romantic, but I think the dystopian view is that there is a relationship between machines and humans, where humans serve the machines, and there is a utopian view where machines are enabling us to spend less time on the things that machines are much better at doing than we are. But I don't think we have yet an answer to, but what do we do then as humans if we don't have to do all of this other stuff anymore? And their organizations, I think, are still struggling. They're quite good at automatizing tasks, but they are not very good at amplifying the humanity capacity of other tasks that we didn't think were needed or possible, or that we had space for that before. So I think this is where, if we want to have a world where humans can live in a fairly harmonious way with their environment and do things that are beautiful expressions of their humanity, then we need to think about how we structure organizations or structure communities or structure the economy in ways that that focus that.
Perfect. I think what you've done is ended on the beginning of a new podcast. So, because that's something that we need to explore. And I think, there's so much to unpack there. But I just want to extend a huge thank you to you, Bastian, for coming in, sharing your incredible knowledge, your insights, and your dreams and aspirations about what the world could be like as well. I found it fascinating. I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Powered by Delenta.